And what have you heard about hospital birth?
Just seems like it appears as though more women give birth at hospitals. More of a mainstream thing to do. And, I thought potentially maybe it's a safer option, potentially. Just that would come to mind.
And what when you say safer option, what does safety mean to you? What are you looking? What are the concerns that come up for you? Or even as you say, it's mainstream. So of course we do the images that we see in media and whatnot are much more about labor and birth happening in the hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of drama around birth. It's unfortunately, most labor and birth is not dramatic. It takes time, right? But that's what movies are about, right? So let's talk a little bit about what the realities are. What are the things that worry you? First, let's start with what type. Leave aside place of birth, because there are a lot of probably more similarities than there are differences for someone who's very healthy. So. We can describe in place of birth, right? You have a room.
Yeah.
In either place, you will choose an environment that feels safe and comfortable for you. You may or may not be, on a sofa, on a bed, or on the floor, depending on when you're actually having the baby. But labor takes time, so there's a lot of time to think about how you're going to negotiate your comfort in labor, right? Some women will use water, some will use showers, tubs. Some women will want to kneel and put their heads on a sofa, have someone press their back. And so one thing you know about is what are those comfortable spaces in your own environment. And you may not be as much as knowledgeable about. So in the hospital there, we have now started to evolve the options for comfort care that include position changes, birth balls, squatting stools, things like that. Some hospitals have them, some don't. Some hospitals have tubs and water and available, and some don't. In where we live here in BC, there's no option for a birth center, but in some settings around the world, there's sort of a birth setting which is like delivering in the provider's home. It's a nice home-like environment. Usually you can't do anything in a birth center that you wouldn't do at home, because it's the same amount of equipment, same kind of screening criteria, same guidelines for what makes sense to have. In the northern part of this province, there are health centers where women live so far from access to a hospital that has the equipment or personnel that they'll have an in-between place that they can go to labor or sometimes to deliver to. So that's what's here. But since you live in Vancouver, we're talking about planned home birth or planned hospital birth. And in this province, the people who attend planned home births are midwives. So if you chose to have a planned home birth, you'd be working with a midwife. For a long time, it was difficult to assess safety of place of birth, because the studies they did mixed up unplanned home birth with planned home birth. Oh, wow. There were a lot of studies that said, okay, the birth certificate said you delivered at home, and you delivered in the hospital. And so two things happened. One, they would only be comparing actual home births to actual hospital births, and not those people who had planned home births who transferred to the hospital. So that would mean that the hospital would seem like it had more risk, because anybody who had a complication who transferred would be in the hospital group. So that wasn't a clean way to study it. The other thing is that if you included all the women at home who accidentally delivered preterm, delivered en route to the hospital, had no attendant, clearly they weren't being offered the same opportunity for safety and outcomes. So, or they, whether maybe they didn't have access to that. So that also skews the data. The good news is that since 1996, we've had a number of studies that have emerged from all around the world, and some of them quite large. The most recent one being with over 750,000 women in the Netherlands, which has had a long tradition of planned home birth with qualified midwives, and an integrated system where if they have to change the plan, they will go to the hospital. And they studied this through their national method of data collection. So everybody provides data, and it wasn't just a select group. It was for the whole country. And they compared planned home birth with planned hospital birth. So planned home birth, meaning with a qualified attendant, with a low-risk, healthy woman, with access to the equipment and and trained personnel in both settings, and access to changing the plan if you need to, right? So in that context, when you compare home and hospital, they found there were no differences really between any setting.
Okay.
And in the UK, they did a large study with 65,000 women. This was published in 2011, and ongoing they're analyzing the data because they got a lot of data. They looked at cost, they looked at planned home birth, a freestanding birth center, a birth center inside the hospital, or midwife-led unit in the hospital, and an obstetric-led unit. And they compared across those 4 different settings and found that, in fact, the bottom line is that in the high-resource countries, birth is very safe, that wherever you deliver, things go well, and the absolute risk of complications is very, very low. But that, in fact, they didn't find large differences between populations for the important outcomes that matter. There were some differences, small differences for first-time mothers, and it's unclear whether that was related to birthplace or skill of provider or, there may be other factors, so they're still trying to understand that, but they were very, very small in any case. And based on that, the NICE guidelines, which are the national guidelines in the UK, and they're really looked at all through Europe. They're like the CDC that we have here in Canada. They came out just in February of this year recommending. So they used to say birth outcomes are equal across birth sites and people should be offered choice. But now they're actually recommending that low-risk, multiparous women who've had babies before be encouraged to deliver at home because it's both safer and cost-effective for the system, and that it's equal across. And that's just come out just last month. Patty Jansen, right here at UBC, published a large study around cost of different places of birth, and if you have 2 equal options, and we're trying to health resource wise, so that she made it very clear that planned home birth, even when you include the people who have to transfer and who require more attention, saves the province many thousands of dollars. So that isn't to say that it's appropriate for everybody, right? Not everybody should feel like being at home. You can have a good birth in all settings. The point is more that you have choice, and you have to decide what's right for you and your family.
Yes. And I'm just thinking of family, for me to explain all this to my parents, like if I sort of I feel like I'd say to them, hey Dad, I'm having a home birth. He has no idea what that even means. So it would be wonderful for him to hear all this, I feel like, because they would be judgmental of it for sure.
But they'd be concerned. Well, they're your parents, and you'll be a parent soon. And I have 4 children. I'll tell you that there's nothing more important than your children's well-being. And so, in the absence of information, of course, if that's the normative thing, the normative way to do things, they want the best for you, and that's where they're coming from.
Well, they keep on, do you have a doctor? Well, we have 4 midwives and a doctor of sorts.
Yes.
But
so they don't even understand the difference in model of care.
No.
Not so much. No.
No.
Well, we can provide you. What does your father do?
He's retired.
He's retired.
But he was
Does he have
electronics.
So he's a science sort of person or a math type person?
Yeah, more logical.
More logical. Right. So you have to figure out where they, what will speak to him. So there's actually the Lancet, which is like the New England Journal of Medicine. It is the most respected medical journal in the world, the Lancet, and they came out with a large series on midwifery care and about how midwifery care improves outcomes. And so we can provide articles to him, or if it's simpler, you're welcome to bring your father to a prenatal appointment. This is you don't have to make the decision right now, and you can decide whether this is your decision as parents, and it's up to you how much you want to inform your community and how much you feel like they are part of that. In some communities, the elders are very much part of that decision making, and that's fine. And then we make space, so you can bring your father to a prenatal appointment. We can answer his questions. We can provide reading. There are some online resources that I will give you. And we can keep talking about this. But you also can choose, it's just like everybody will have an opinion about how you name your baby, right?
Oh, yes.
And, your parents had a chance. Now it's your chance. Yes. So, and it's not a moment in time. It's not like you have to tell me today or tell me next week, this is what we're going to do. It's hard when you have a whole community who are choosing one option. And that'll be true when your parents do. It's not even about just home birth. We're talking about home birth today, but, do you carry your baby all the time or not? Do you, sleep train them or not? Do you sleep? So you'll have to make those decisions yourselves for what works for your family. Think about in a more global thing, what your goals are and your philosophy about it. You thought that you wanted to think a little bit about how to present these choices with your family, whether or not you want to discuss that, and you can think about that, and we can talk more about that the next time you come.
It'll be a conversation to be had, yes, that we will have. I still feel that, that there will be a little bit of shock there if we just said, home birth is happening, so providing some literature with them. Some people will make that decision, in labor and inform the extended family afterwards. Oh yeah, that's a good point.
I'm a mother, and I'm hoping to be a grandmother soon. So I'm always in favor of being as open as you can with your, immediate family if you're very close to them anyway, because it's going to come out anyway, right? And this is their grandchild. So, but we can help you. We can help you with those conversations. Okay. That's part of
ultimately
our role.
It is our decision, but I'm just thinking of the little shadows.
Absolutely.
Around.
And that you don't want that to be affecting whether or not you feel safe and comfortable where you are, right? So sometimes it's helpful to address it up front. And sometimes people get surprised. I've certainly had many of my clients who choose an option like that, whether it's a midwife or a natural birth or a home birth, and when they talk to their parents, they find out that their grandmother was delivered at home, or their father was, and they didn't even know that.
So that's interesting. That's a good point. So that discussion needs to be had.
Let me give you some things that you could look at, in between our visit. So I have some books here that might be helpful for you as you think about this decision, and you don't have to take them all. As different people, respond to different types of information. This book, Your Baby Your Way, is an older book, but it is a wonderful book about listening to the heartbeat and telling the story and what labor looks like. Okay.
Great.
And we also have some online resources. Our clinic secretary can put you in touch with that. Sometimes it's easier at your desk, or if you have a busy work to. So there's a lot of information out there. It's just hard to sort through it, and we can help you. Tell me a little bit about how in your family. How long have you been together?
Who knows the answer? About 6 years.
6 years. Yeah. Okay, so you've had a little time to figure out how you decide where you're going to go to dinner, where you're going to go for vacation, who's going to come to your wedding. Some of the more important things too. How do you think you will? What can I do to help you in the next step? Maybe you need different things, some type of information or some time. What will help you?
Time will be helpful. So I'd like to go home and debrief what we've just discussed.
I find we make decisions pretty efficiently. Like we are on the same wavelength, but like I said earlier, as much as it's a mutual decision, I want to make sure she's fully comfortable with the decision, because at the end of the day, she's the one providing the service of the giving birth. So but. And what springs to mind to you if you're...
Well, for me, the combination of this discussion we've had and the information we're going to take home with us, and then us discussing, and...
You mentioned potentially talking to some other people that might have gone through the process.
Yeah, that's true, because
Like,
we
we
don't
only have
know
the
very
one
many
friend.
people who have had
Yeah.
home births.
We can certainly do that. Of course, everybody's. We can come up with a variety of people. I always like to mention that different. Well, sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes people have different perceptions of risk,
That's
right?
true.
So,
Yeah.
what's
right.
really important to them. So,
Yeah.
probably trying to figure out what's important to you as a family.
Yes.
You know, as part of that process. But absolutely.